Hi, Denny Johnson here, and this is a response to a question from Carlos in Brazil. This is a question about what we can do for our children, specifically focused on the prenatal conditions. I would like to do a series of recordings about this and continuing through especially the first 8 years, because virtually everything that occurs to a child is so much woven into the prenatal and emotional conditions of the parents. So in the process of being able to look at what children have when they're born, even early onset diseases and such, it is everything to do with what's happening in the emotional or spiritual condition of the parents. This is based on my experience with the Rayid family tree, R-A-Y-I-D, and you can also access more information about this from the Rayid Facebook group, Rayid International. This is a profound consideration, Carlos. I know that you are well equipped to understand the biochemical considerations and the body cleansing considerations, so I won't go into the whole nutritional aspects or possible supplements that might be possible at this time period. I'd like to discuss those things that are not most commonly discussed, because after these many years of accessing and studying thousands of family tree patterns in children and looking at the birth order significance and looking at the mother and the father and spending numbers of years examining severely deformed infants, there are some things that really now I know more about now than I did some 30 years ago. Now what's more real for me is the condition of the mother and father is paramount to the consideration of really what happens for children who are being considered to come into the world. Under ideal circumstances, the mother and the father, they're prepared emotionally, physically, financially, and their desires are clean, and we can have a soul born into an environment that is desired, wanted, nurtured, and so on. Okay, so this is an ideal environment. Most children are not conceived in this way, but let's discuss for a moment what would be ideal. What would be ideal is both the mother and the father, they are integrated in their mutual desire to experience love through this child. The experience of this child is an opportunity to increase their own degree of love. So part of this is for the mother and the father to examine what is their sincere motive for wanting to have a child. Because the sincere motive or the intention has a lot to do with the long-term development of this child. The more pure and loving is our desire to have a child, the greater the consistency of the glands, organs, body systems of the child developing correctly. So, examine, what is a father or a mother's desire to have a child? Is it to secure the relationship? This is not a pure desire. Is it to feel complete as a man or a woman by having a child? This is not a pure desire. So we have to examine what is the real motive for why we want a child. Somebody to take care of us when we're older? Somebody to take care of the house or the other kids? Probably not a pure or sincere desire. For me, the only pure and sincere desire is the sharing of love and the increase of divine love in the family. This is a very profound place to consider. What is that really like? What does that really mean? because in some form or another, we need to slightly open up our perception of what is this child? What is this soul? Why is it here? First of all, at least a consideration that this incoming soul already has a father and a mother. A divine mother, a divine father, and that the actual true creator of this soul is God. And that is our opportunity to see that relationship as being the paramount consideration. That's important. This whole process of recognizing that we are bringing a soul into the world that doesn't belong to us. It's not bound into our family by these elastic cords of control or the mechanisms of selfishness or greed or whatever. This is a soul coming in for the spiritual purpose of their own capacity to grow in love. So our purpose for bringing a child into the world is a divine purpose for the increase of love. That consideration, then, mother and father, one of the most significant things that aligns the consistency of the development of the child from head down to the tailbone is the congruency that mother and father have a common spiritual objective. By that I mean that they may share some long-term spiritual convictions or belief systems about what their relationship is really for. So if a mother and a father are at odds about one religion or another, or my religion is superior to yours, or one's an atheist and one's a religious fanatic, then we're already setting up difficulties. If they both together believe that their religion is superior to other religions, this sets up another kind of difficulty. When I refer to these difficulties, I'm referring to ultimately nervous system, brain, glandular, genetic dysfunctions based on a lack of spiritual reality in the convictions of the mother and the father. If the mother and the father are humble, they have a love of truth, and they have a yearning and a desire to know God, and they're doing that congruently together with or without a religion, this is the most important of all forms of development for that child. I know it's a challenging thing to consider that incongruencies in this can actually damage 3 generations continuously and more on into the future. Also, part of this consideration is the relationship that both mother and father have to their own parents. Now, it's virtually impossible to develop a successful, healthy child if the mother or the father is holding patterns of bitterness or anger, resentment or hate with their own parents. So what's the most important consideration for this prenatal development? Well, it's the same thing as it is in life. Resolve your own personal issues with your own parents as openly and as lovingly as you can, and this provides the environment for a child to be able to develop the highest capacity to sustain their own links to their grandparents and great-grandparents in a loving way. You know from this work that the 12 grandparents are like rivers that come down through the mother and the father side of the family, and they flow into this child to develop all of the uniqueness of body type and capacities and creative gifts and so on and so on. The family tree and the epigenetic influence of the unresolved patterns in this family tree are very, very important. Later we might consider how to use the iris of the eye, how to use the birth order, and how to use the family history to be able to determine how to clean things up for the child before that child is even conceived, or while that child is being gestated. For example, if there's a noticeable pattern of addiction, alcohol, drugs, tobacco in the family tree, and they're coming down specific lines, it is possible for the mother and the father to begin to clean up those lines, primarily through the desire to do so and prayer, to be able to clean these lines to give that child the maximum opportunity to be able to develop. Lots of things that are possible by looking at the whole family health history, and even how the grandfather or the great-grandfather died of heart disease or diabetes, to see where these lines might continue. That's another part we can get into at another time. Also, to recognize the birth order position of the child that's arriving, because this is going to be a great deal of the indication of what the inherent natural attributes of this child might be, that as a mother and a father, and even as grandparents, we can be involved in the long-term development of this child. Yes, the grandparents, and when available, the great-grandparents, if they are aware of the arrival of this soul into the family, and they also have sincere, loving intentions for the flow of this child into the family, wow, what a wonderful family to be born into. So this is just a brief overview of other things we can cover, and I will be willing to respond to questions as much as I know about these conditions. But Carlos, this is my first input in what we might consider, what we might do as parents prior to conception or even in utero. So Carlos, thank you for the question. Talk to you again.